Hi, I'm Mike Ellsworth. I'm the project manager for the Minnesota Social Media for Workforce Development Pilot. I'm going to talk a little bit about how we get into the Reemployment Connections initiative and what we've done so far. So, after receiving the grant, the first thing we did was convene a project team. That included members from DEED, which is the agency I'm in, the Department of Employment and Economic Development, from the Workforce Development Division, from our Labor Exchange, which is MinnesotaWorks.net, from our Communications Department, and representatives from 3 of the WIBs in Minnesota. And we got together and we established the project objectives. And our overall general objective was to provide a place where users can get quick answers to their questions. And generally these questions have to do with job seeking and workforce development types of topics. And how we will know when we're successful is by the level of engagement. One of the reasons I think that we were selected to be a pilot state was because we have a fair amount of social media activity, and we were looking to increase that and use some of the metrics on the screen here in order to figure out how well we're doing. A little more detail on the objectives. We decided we had a handful of them. One was to develop a social media policy. We did not have one statewide at the time we started the project. Understand the segments of our audience, so job seekers and counselors and employers, for example. Develop training as necessary on social media techniques for use for helping job seekers as well as employers. And to cooperate with another project that's ongoing, a state project called the Virtual Workforce Center effort. And finally, we didn't want to forget the employers. We wanted to make sure that we collaborated with them, and our target was to develop a talent community, and I will talk lots more about that later on in the presentation. So quick results. We have a draft of the social media policy. It's going through final approvals. We did execute statewide surveys for both people who work in the workforce centers, as we call them here, or American Job Centers, as well as for UI claimants. We developed and executed the training based on what we found out from our survey. We are advising our Virtual Workforce Center effort, which is ongoing. And the thing that we're most focused on right now is collaborating with employers to create a talent community integrated with our labor exchange, MinnesotaWorks.net. So we executed 2 statewide surveys, one of job center staff. This included all partners. It wasn't just necessarily state staff. And the other with REA session participants. And we were focusing on the demographic of 40 to 55 years old because our assumption was that this age demographic would probably need a little more help with social media. So the target audience for the job seeker, as I said, unemployed, they're on UI, they're 40 to 55. We wanted to focus a little more on the structurally unemployed people having a hard time finding jobs, leaving out seasonal, union represented. So 40% of claimants in Minnesota are over the age 40, and the average age of a UI claimant is 44. So I think we selected our demographic fairly well. On the AJC staff, our focus was everybody there, anyone who wanted to respond to our survey or take our training, including all partners, managers, etc. And then we also had as a secondary objective to identify candidates to adopt the pilot training programs that we were going to provide. So first, let's take a look at the staff. And we first wanted to find out whether there was a difference between outstate Minnesota, greater Minnesota, and the Twin Cities, where the majority of it's the largest population concentration in the state. And we found not much difference in terms of where what was being used, Facebook, LinkedIn, YouTube, etc., and how much people were using them. For the UI claimants, we got a really good response rate from REA attendees over the course of a month of over 2,900 surveys, 57%. And we did not really find a whole lot of differences between respondents aged 40 and 55 and the whole population. There were some. They used mobile devices much less to access the internet. They were much heavier users of LinkedIn. They were more likely to use LinkedIn and less likely to use Facebook. And they were more interested in training related to job searching for LinkedIn and Google+. They also were more likely to be concerned about sharing personal information. It probably doesn't surprise anyone who's worked with younger people. They don't seem to have that same kind of feeling. And less likely to have a post-secondary degree in our case. But other than that, the findings were all pretty consistent, regardless of age demographic. So one of the objectives of this survey was to find out whether people were interested in obtaining training through the workforce centers on social media. And we found that there were some people who were interested, but we were actually quite interested to find that last row there, which says, I'm not interested in training, 45%. That either means they don't want to use social media or they feel like they already have everything they need in terms of social media training. And with some of the other questions in the survey, we determined that it was probably the latter, that they actually felt that they were competent in using social media for job search, which was a very surprising finding. So we went ahead and we created job seeker training, and then we trained the job center staff, including the partners. And these are the training modules. There's some intro courses, some advanced courses. There's some general things about creating an online brand and how to act online and how to network using social media. So that was the initial effort that we did, and we completed the training of the workforce center staff in June, and we've turned now most of our attention to our next objective, which was talent communities. So we did some research and we found at least, I know there are probably more, 3 public sector talent community efforts in Minnesota. I'm going to give you a definition of talent community in a minute. And so we took a look at those efforts and we combined their business requirements and added some of our own, and then we developed a plan to integrate a third-party talent community software with our labor exchange, MinnesotaWorks.net. So these were our objectives: to add a statewide multi-tenant talent community to our labor exchange, available to all qualified Minnesota employers and economic developers and, of course, interested talent, and enable regional entities to create spaces with customized job feeds to help attract and retain talent into their regions. These are the 3 efforts. I'm not going to go through them, but they were all over the state. The Bremer Grant was a foundation grant given in the northwest area of Minnesota. St. Cloud is north central and Duluth is northeast. We also did some research on private talent communities, and this is quite a trend in human resources and especially in talent acquisition. We found, and here's an example of a private talent community in Minnesota. You may have heard of Best Buy. So the reason that HR professionals and employers are interested in talent communities is the fact that research shows that 92% of candidates that go to a career site aren't ready to apply to the job for one reason or another. It's not a fit, or they don't know enough, or they're not ready. They're maybe passive candidates. So, HR people want to try to figure out what to do with these folks. They've indicated an interest in your company and in a job, but you can't get them into your system, into your applicant tracking system. The other problem is regions lack effective tools to retain talent and attract new talent, and that's why of those 3 efforts that I mentioned in Minnesota, all 3 were either led by or had a significant economic developer component. They were interested in trying to either stop the drain of talent out of their region or to attract new talent, as well as new businesses. And then also the fact that, in general, smaller businesses find it difficult to compete with talent. They don't have the money of a Best Buy to do a nice, slick talent community like what we just looked at. So finally, I'm going to give you a definition of what I'm talking about when I mention the talent community. It's a shared community space where businesses with jobs connect with people wanting jobs now or in the future via one-to-one and one-to-many communication features. So it integrates a lot of social media, also other types of online techniques such as forums, video chat, online webinars like we're doing right now, various other types of online features to make sure that there's a better way for someone with a talent to connect with someone with a job rather than just the resume, which we feel is kind of a bare minimum to be able for someone to be able to communicate what they can do for an employer, and for employers on the job rec side to communicate what it is they want. So it's a more rich interface between the two parties. So the general features that we feel a talent community needs to have is places for business to advertise the benefits of employment. So this is why, in the case of Best Buy, this is why you want to work for Best Buy. We're cool. We have all these benefits. There's a great culture, those types of things. Ways for businesses to engage with talent, not only active job seekers, but also passive candidates. And they need to try to provide a way to attract them to keep coming back to the talent community, because if you're not actively searching, or if you maybe have visited one time, what is the reason why you might want to come back? So you have to set up attractive features like interesting forums and things like that. And then integration with MinnesotaWorks.net. All three of those efforts that I mentioned in Minnesota had a job feed component, and most of them were going to collect jobs from their regions and basically host a mini labor exchange. So we feel that as the state's labor exchange, MinnesotaWorks.net was the place to try to not only take the job feed, but also organize the whole talent community around. So some of the other features need to have various types of communication, private one-to-one, one-to-many, many-to-many, social integration, social media integration, allowing people who may see a job on MinnesotaWorks.net they're not qualified for to maybe post that on Twitter or LinkedIn or for the benefit of the people who may be more interested in it. Needs promotion features for both employers and economic developers. So that not, in addition to having pages that talk about items of interest, the ability to have ads on the site, email campaigns, that sort of thing, and then an integration with MinnesotaWorks.net so that people can actually get a custom filtered job, an employer can, by region, by occupation, and present that to job seekers who may be interested. So in the screens that follow, I'm going to buzz through them kind of quick, show you the mock-ups that we have of what our talent community might look. I'll just take just a minute to talk about where we are right now. We have the business requirements. We've discussed those with the technical resources here at DEED and have some cost estimation, and we're preparing an RFI to try to find a vendor to provide the services. We don't want to build. We think it's much more efficient for us to buy that, since there's plenty of talent community vendors out there. So here's a little bit of the mock-ups that we have. Think about a talent community as something akin to kind of a private LinkedIn or Facebook. So it's got a lot of different features that you'll think are very similar. So you can have like a home page where you can see messages from your friends, announcements from the various employers that you may have, quotes, friended, people that you know, a calendar, and a little bit of a summary. This is very much like LinkedIn in many ways. You can drill down deeper into the people who you've connected with, and we'll want to be able to filter them by the various types of attributes that those people might have, and then kind of like friending we have the idea of maybe shaking hands with them, introducing yourself, sending a message, adding them as a connection. There's a calendar. We feel that we need to be able to integrate things like a virtual career fair and webinars and other types of one-to-many types of communication. So you can see that I've highlighted a virtual career fair here on the calendar. You can get more information on that and RSVP to it. Messaging is critical, both private and public messaging. This is an example of a job feed. This is just mocked up. It's not what the final one is going to look like at all. But once again, you're going to want to be able to filter things on the side here by the types of companies and job types and categories that you might be interested in. One big key to talent communities is communities. So forums, you might think of them as, or LinkedIn groups, or Facebook pages. Those various types of popular social media, those types of ideas need to happen in here, because probably the way you're going to get somebody to come back to a talent community is by providing interesting discussions. So that's key. And then, of course, there's the profile. So in our initial iteration, we are not going to synchronize the profile with the MinnesotaWorks.net profile, but eventually there'll be a much tighter integration between the two so that there'll be a single login. And then there's, of course, as I mentioned, video enablement, so that you can have, on-the-fly ad hoc video conversations with people. Maybe an employer could do a video interview with you. You could post a video resume and introduce yourself that way, and other types of video integration into the community. So now that we have our business requirements, get them costed out, we're going to go back and get some more employer feedback. And these are the general questions that we're going to ask. Basically, are you interested? If we're going to show them the feature set, well, now that you've seen the feature set, kind of like what I was just showing you, which are the interesting and less interesting and less valuable features, and then an indication of interest. Well, would you actually join this, and would you recommend it to your peers? So that's where we are right now on that. So if you have any questions or suggestions, you can contact me directly using the contact information you see right here. And thanks a lot for your participation.